Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. You know, guys, as we've been hanging on the corner, I've been telling you that you just never know who's going to show up. That's the great part about just hanging here at the Behavioral Corner. Today we have somebody with us that represents what we like to do very often throughout the course of the year, and that is talk about recovery and give you a great example of a voice in recovery. I've mentioned it lots of times, hanging out here on the corner, and before that, we all know an awful lot about the disease of addiction and its devastating effects. We also know it's a struggle to remain sober, but what we often don't pay enough attention to is that in spite of all that, literally millions of people are living right now in long-term successful sobriety. That's the most important factor of all to remind people. It's being done, as I said, by millions of people, and we've got a great example of that. Katie Newman is with us, and she is, making her way successfully through now 5 years of sobriety. Katie, thanks for hanging on the corner with us.
Good to talk to you, too.
You've had some very exciting events in your life recently, right? Got a new baby?
Yep, new baby in the middle of the pandemic, which has been fun. She's 3 months old now.
And what's her name?
Alice.
Alice. Oh, what a great name. Old school name. I like that. Solid.
Yeah.
Solid name. I like that a lot. Katie's 29 years old, and as I said, she is now 5 years sober. Katie, let's talk a little bit about you. Where are you from, and what was the family like? And tell us about that.
So I am originally from Bel Air, Maryland. My parents met when they were in college, and my mom got pregnant with me her senior year of college. And they split up not long after that. So growing up was a little bit tumultuous, a lot of chaos in the house, but also a lot of love. Mm-hmm. I have a younger sister who is 2 years younger than me, and then I also have a younger brother who is 12 years younger than me from my mom's second marriage. Mm-hmm. My mom and dad are very, very different. My mom is this hippie, Grateful Dead loving woman, free spirit, doesn't really believe in rules. And then on the other hand, my dad was in the military, very, very strict. Had a lot of rules.
Wait a minute. Wow. I have children of my own who are now adults, and they have children, but they will tell you they were raised by hippies. But they caught a break because both mom and dad were card-carrying hippies. How do you wind up with a hippie mom and a military dad? That couldn't have been easy as a youngster, right?
No, it was not easy. The two households were very, very different. Like I said, at my mom's house, there really wasn't many rules at all, but my dad was very strict. I think he was a little nervous that he had two girls, kind of had a tight rein on the both of us. Mm. So, at my dad's house, I wasn't allowed to wear makeup, wasn't allowed to date when I got older. They wanted to talk to parents before I went over anyone's house, whereas, my mom was just kind of like, yeah, go do whatever you want. So it was difficult to go back and forth between the two houses. Yeah. And, yeah.
Well, so tell me about your youthful, or just tell me how you first were introduced to substances.
I started drinking when I was about 11, and that was, at my mom's house. It was pretty acceptable in her mind. If we were drinking at home, it didn't really matter. Now looking back, 11 to me is so young, but she kind of just, thought it was okay. She had her own alcohol and drug problems, so she wasn't exactly in her right mind either. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I started drinking at about 11, and it wasn't every day. But pretty much whenever I wanted to drink, I could. I had my own case of Smirnoff wine coolers in the cabinet, and I could just kind of help myself. So that really started for me pretty young.
Yeah, I'm no longer shocked at the ages. I've heard as young as 8. What I'm struck by is that what they all have in common, no matter what the age the youth started, it was always in the context of normalcy. In other words, didn't seem odd to you at all, did it?
No, it did not seem odd to me at all. And I didn't have any other friends at that age that were drinking, but it really didn't seem strange to me. It was totally normal for me to be drinking at that point and getting drunk.
Mm. So what was the progression of that? You were getting drunk at 11, 12, 13 years old. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So, I like to think that I was a pretty normal drinker throughout my high school years. But looking back, I definitely drank a lot more than my peers did. I was blacking out by age, I want to say 14. All I could think about was drinking from, that age on. And because of my mom's issues, I kind of always had an aversion to drugs. I saw what drugs did to my mom and my stepfather. And, I thought to myself, I'm never going to smoke weed. I'm never going to do any drugs. But it's okay for me to black out drink whenever I want.
Yeah. You choose your spot and say, well, I'm not that. I'm okay here, but I'm not that. So you knew Mom was using as you were a young teenager. Was it essentially marijuana and drinking that she was doing openly in front of you?
She was, drinking a lot in front of me. They also used cocaine. They never did cocaine in front of me, but it was around the house. So I would see it. I knew it was there. I knew what it was, but they weren't doing it directly in front of me.
Mm-hmm. When did you progress or did you progress to harder substances?
I most certainly did progress to harder substances. I started smoking weed when I was 15. And then by the time I was, well, let me take a step back. So I had an ADHD diagnosis from the time I was 12 on. So I had an adderall prescription. And I started abusing that adderall prescription at about age 15 as well. And then by age 20, I was, doing cocaine, Xanax.
Really? Let me stop you for a second. I don't think I've ever asked anybody this. Lots of youngsters have been prescribed, Adderall, all kinds of drugs for kids who are hyperactive or whatever. What's the decision-making process in your head when you're taking it for something, that's been prescribed, and then you decide, well, gee, maybe if I took a little more of it, I'd get high. Is that what you did? How did you wind up abusing Adderall? What was the high like? And tell me about it.
Well, I think it was, I don't want to say peer pressure, but it never really occurred to me that I could take it, for recreational purposes until a friend of mine suggested that. Now looking back, I don't know that I needed the Adderall prescription. I kind of think that I was just, suffering from untreated alcoholism at, a young age. Mm-hmm. And that kind of presented itself in other forms. Mm-hmm. And, that's why they had prescribed it to me. But, the Adderall, it enhanced the drinking. It made me feel exactly the way I wanted to feel as soon as I started, taking more than what was prescribed.
Right.
And it was really hard for me to stop.
Were you a good student, bad student, whatever? And did you have a kind of normal and except for the substance abuse, large social group?
I did, yeah. Except for the substance abuse, I was pretty normal. I played field hockey. I played lacrosse. I was captain of the lacrosse team. I did okay in school, B's and C's, nothing, crazy. I think that I probably didn't really apply myself. But I didn't get in trouble in school. I wasn't, really the normal idea of what people have of a problem child. On the outside, things really did look okay for me for a long time.
Yeah, too often we imagine that the teenager you're describing is, and this is a horrible stereotype, but she's a youngster who's maybe getting her first tattoos or piercings, and she's hanging with a strange crowd, and she doesn't leave her room, and she's uncommunicative. You were none of that. You were the kid on the front of the Wheaties box, right?
Yep, that was me. I was none of those things. I had a good group of friends. None of those friends are alcoholics or, drug addicts to this day. They all, maintained normalcy in their substance use. I think it was really surprising to people, my family and my friends, when later on, I had more serious problems.
Let me guess that college was the tipping point for you. Am I right?
Oh, yeah. College was most definitely the tipping point. I had originally looked at a school in North Carolina. I was supposed to play field hockey there. And I went down to visit, and I was told that to be a member of the field hockey team, I had to do a 3-month dry season, the first 3 months, during field hockey season, so that none of the girls drank or anything. And when I heard that, I said, no way, this is not for me. I'm coming to college to get away from home. I'm coming to college to party. Schoolwork never even crossed my mind. So my first semester away from school was a huge tipping point, and things really escalated for me.
Yeah. When you make that decision, and it's an extraordinary decision, it shows you how the grip of this disease can change the way you make decisions. When you walk away from kind of the all-American girl lifestyle and choose to party, what was the reaction of, I guess your mom went, well, whatever, I had fun in college. Is that what happened?
Yeah, my mom pretty much said, well, whatever. And my dad was shocked. I had dedicated a lot of my life to field hockey. Starting from 7th grade on, I was playing either field hockey or lacrosse 7 days a week. I was on club teams. I had always said I want to play in college. That was a goal of mine. So for me to go down to school with that intention, to visit, and then all of a sudden I'm saying, I don't want to do this anymore. My dad was really, really shocked.
And angry, right?
Oh, yeah. He was not happy. He thought I was making a huge mistake.
It's amazing. I know you've thought of this, but looking back, he was always the stone in your shoe, and Mom was always like the cool one. Doesn't look like that now, does it?
No, it doesn't. I love my mom to death. She has supported me and been there for me in ways that I don't know that I would have made it if she wasn't. But at the same time, I think if my dad hadn't been around, I don't know if I would be alive right now.
Mm-hmm. Katie, take us through the progression. Where did all this lead you eventually?
Well, I ended up dropping out of that school in North Carolina and moving home, where I found that none of my old friends from high school were around anymore. So I did fall into that crowd of the typical bad kid. They were doing harder drugs, and at that point, I was very interested in experimenting. So, I started out with Xanax and prescription painkillers here and there, and that very, very quickly progressed to bath salts and methamphetamine. I started using those when I was around, I want to say 2021, and not long after that, I found myself in my first rehab facility.
Yeah, before you get to that, a couple of things. First of all, what's a bath salt high like? I can't even. What is that like?
It is very similar to methamphetamine.
Oh, so it's a stimulant. It's a speedy thing, right?
Yes, it is a speedy thing.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you ingest it?
You can use needles, you can snort it, or you can eat it.
Yeah. Where do you get it?
It depends.
I mean, you can just buy bath salt, right? Can you just buy it?
Not anymore. And by the time I had started using them, you couldn't anymore. I actually knew a person that made them in his home. So that's where I got them from.
Yeah, well, that brings up the other thing you mentioned that I want to impress upon people. This notion of falling in with a bad crowd, it's not like you woke up one day, your friends were still at school and they had moved on with their lives, and so you couldn't rely on them. So it's not like you woke up and said, I need a bad crowd to hang with. It's more like, let me find some people that I'm comfortable with. Is that how it works?
Definitely. Yeah, I was just looking for new friends. And, those people didn't have anything to do really with my, alcoholism progressing, I was searching for that. And, you draw what you are yourself, you attract what you are yourself. And I was definitely looking for people I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And those people, were doing the things that I was comfortable with. And it made my drinking and drug use seem more normal.
Yeah.
And that's really what I was looking for.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people still don't understand that dynamic. But it really is nothing more than looking for kindred spirits involved in the same behavior so that it feels like, well, it's okay. It's what we all do, right? So did you progress beyond? Did you get to anything, not that there's anything worse than methamphetamine, but did you experiment with heroin?
I did, yeah. Now, that actually didn't start until after I went to rehab for the first time. You talk about the kindred spirits, and I met some more kindred spirits in treatment. And, the first few times I went to treatment, I didn't really have any intention of staying sober. So I, flocked to the other people that didn't have any intention of staying sober. And after I got out of treatment for the first time, I used heroin for the first time and also crack.
Tell me about the circumstances around the first time you get to treatment. How did that happen?
So I had a very, very bad night drinking and using bath salts. And my friends, I was in a blackout, and I kind of came to with my friends, yelling at me, asking me why I'm acting like this. How can I do this? And, I drink, I get very, very mean. I can get violent. I turn into a completely different person. And so, they're wondering why I'm behaving like this. And, I don't know where the thought came from, but I went home that night and I told my mom that I think I needed to go to rehab. And I thought that rehab was just, an intensive 30 days of therapy, and that I would be able to go and talk about past trauma and depression and anxiety, and then be able to come out of there and drink normally.
Yeah.
That was my thought.
Yeah, maybe even meet a cute guy and have I call that the Sandra Bullock syndrome, where right? You go in, you got a problem, 30 days later it's gone, and you're in love with some doctor or something like that. And but that myth, that fantasy still persists. Doesn't work like that. How many times altogether, and between what ages, were you in and out of rehab?
I went to rehab 5 different times between the age 21 and 23.
5 different times. Residential treatment every time?
Yep, residential treatment every time. I did the full 30 days every time.
Detox, the whole thing?
The whole thing, yep. Detox, and then the inpatient every time. What
would happen after every stint in rehab that, looking back, was it the lack of motivation going in that caused you to relapse, or what other things might have factored in?
I think it was lack of motivation. You talk about the guy. I would always meet a guy who also had a lack of motivation. And I wasn't really prepared to do the things I needed to do when I got out of treatment to stay sober. I would get really caught up in, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would get really caught up in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and the hanging out. And I would, completely ignore the step work part of it. I would completely stop going to therapy and not deal with the other problems I have apart from, substance use.
No, it's interesting. I mean, you were into the hang and not the work.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's an aspect of AA that a lot of people fall prey to. Serious relapse over that period of time. Did you ever seriously overdose? Or?
I had an overdose after my first treatment, and that prompted my next treatment. And after my second treatment, I got my first DUI. And then, after the next few, it wasn't anything, nothing really serious happened that would prompt me to go back into treatment. Most of the time, I would end up kicked out of my recovery house, homeless, without any money, and, rehab seems like a really good idea when I've got nothing else left.
Yeah, a lot of people don't appreciate that either, that sometimes multiple visits to rehab are really just a way for the sufferer, person with the disease of addiction, to recharge so they can get back out and do it again.
Definitely.
That's another old story. Hey, we're hanging on the corner with Katie Newman, a new mom, baby's 3 months old. She's 29 years old, sharing her story of substance abuse and now, as I said, 5 years of sobriety.
Every storm runs out of rain, according to the great Maya Angelou. Her words can remind us of one very simple truth, that storms do cross our paths, but they don't last forever. So the question remains, how do we ride out this storm of COVID-19 and all the other storms life may throw our way? Where do we turn when issues such as mental health or substance abuse begin to deeply affect our lives? Look to Retreat Behavioral Health. With a team of industry-leading experts, they work tirelessly to provide a compassionate, holistic, and affordable treatment. Call to learn more today. 855-802-6600. Retreat Behavioral Health, where healing happens.
All right, Katie, you went through your struggles 4 years ago, and a different world 4 or 5 years ago. We're now talking to people who are facing similar situations, either trying to get to rehab for the first time or trying to stay sober in the middle of this pandemic. I know you've observed this. I know you have feelings about, well, how difficult it must be for that. Are you in contact with, are you support in any way with anybody who is in recovery now?
I am. Yeah, I have a really good group of women that I'm friends with, and they are all in recovery. That was a huge thing for me as well. I wasn't really willing in the past to let go of being very close with my friends that were still drinking. And a lot of times that would, lead me, to go back to my old ways. But today, I talk to my friends in recovery almost every day. I talk to my sponsor a few times a week. So I'm surrounded by people in recovery today.
Yeah. What kinds of things are you hearing, and what kind of things are you sharing? We know that we are seeing right now. It's kind of been overlooked by naturally by the pandemic, but there's an alarming spike in overdoses, just a shocking spike in overdoses. They have a multitude of causes behind them, and an equally high number of people who are relapsing and trying to get in treatment again, and it's difficult to do that because of the virus. What kinds of things do you guys share, this group of women that you talk to who are all in sobriety? How are they managing this?
Most of them are doing really well. They all have multiple years of sobriety, but we all have seen, especially with, newcomers who are trying to get sober for the first time or are recently sober again, that are having a hard time, because I think a huge part of, I talk about that I was so focused on the fellowship in, previous years. I think that the support from other people who, have experienced what I've experienced is so important. And it's really hard to make those connections over a Zoom meeting or if you don't know anyone at all.
Yeah.
So I think everyone is just really doing their best to reach out to people that they know are struggling, or even the people that they don't necessarily think are struggling, just to stay in contact with everyone. Mm-hmm. Do what we can to help.
We know that this disease, under the best circumstances, is one that forces isolation, and that's deadly. That can be deadly to somebody suffering from addiction. So here we are now, people trying to maintain their sobriety and being told that it's imperative that they don't gather together. That can lead to stress, and stress is a trigger.
It is. Yeah, definitely. I know, my husband had been sober for 4 years, and he recently relapsed and is now back in treatment. And I saw that with him, the isolation, not reaching out, not being able to go to meetings or meet up with people. And, the stress from that is very serious, and I think was a direct, link to his relapse.
Yeah. When you relapsed, and I guess I can ask you about your husband as you observe it, when you relapsed, did you feel like a failure? Was there shame associated with that, or were you indifferent to the relapses?
Oh, no, there was so much shame. I mean, I look at it a lot differently now, but, 5 years ago when I used for the last time, I felt like such a failure. Like I couldn't even really tell anyone that I had relapsed. It was embarrassing and shameful. That was just me. I don't know why everyone seems to feel that way, because when you finally do reach out, nobody really cares, and everybody just wants, to help you. And it really is just a learning experience. And there's, nothing necessarily wrong with it. I mean, it's really scary now because of all the overdoses, and you never know if, you're going to make it or not if you're using heroin, especially. But if you relapse and you make it out alive, I mean, there's no shame in it. But I definitely remember feeling that shame, and I know that my husband definitely feels that way, especially after having so many years sober and then going back out and using again.
Yeah, it's really scary when you hear people who've had multiple years of sobriety and they stumble. It's a sense of hopelessness might result. But we talked about this before we went on the air, and there's a lot of research right now that says, look, relapse is not something you should plan on. It is not inevitable, but is very, very common. And the researchers are now looking at that and suggesting that, look, if you relapse and don't die, okay, and get back up and try again, these multiple relapses and multiple returns to treatment can actually increase your chances of success. Do you see it that way?
I definitely do. I mean, I can look back at every relapse that I had and see how each one, made me stronger in recovery and made me, a better person. I think I grew up a little bit more each time I relapsed and tried again.
I had a very tragic story of a couple who lost a son to an overdose, and they were now strong advocates for treatment and all of that, and they were just an inspiration. But during a break, I had to ask the mom. I said, it's amazing that someone whose son didn't make it would be so strong about how important it is to pick yourself back up. And she said, "Oh, no. He didn't quit on us. He just got, he just got unlucky in the last one, and it cost him his life." But she said, "No, you got to pick yourself up and try again. If it doesn't kill you, it will make you stronger." That's certainly been your experience, right?
Yeah, it definitely has. And that, unfortunately, that's kind of what it comes down to sometimes is luck on who makes it.
Yeah, but you can't get lucky unless you keep trying. Let's talk about in a couple of minutes here some of the – now, you've got a new baby, so that takes a lot of time. It can be stressful. Yeah. What are some of the kind of positive behaviors you use and you think others might benefit from? I mean, there are things like diet and exercise. But what kind of positive behaviors you think people should be focusing on while they try to maintain their sobriety?
Yeah, diet and exercise is huge. I would also say if you can get to see a therapist, somebody other than just a substance abuse counselor, because those two types of therapies can be very different. And, something that I've been doing, especially since the baby is born, is, it's simple, but I just make 2 goals for myself a day, something that is like easily attainable, whether it's, doing the dishes or getting the laundry finished, things that just keep me motivated and, focused.
Yeah, at least I got that.
Especially while we're in quarantine.
At least I got that done. That makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you with regard to this notion of cravings, because, again, a lot of people on the outside of this disease go, well, why in God's name would you go back to using again once you'd been, 30 or 40, 90 days, 2 years sober? Were your relapses, and I guess I asked you about your husband, associated with a craving or a physical craving to get back in using, or was it a psychological craving? What was it?
I think for me, it's more psychological. I know for my husband, he got into the idea that he could drink like a normal person, and that kind of set him off on a it had been 4 years. He thought he'd be okay if he drank again, and that sent him off on a destructive path. And for me, it's really more psychological.
Did you worry about your sobriety when he relapsed?
Definitely. That was what I was just about to say. He was drinking in the house. Like I said before, like drinking was, the first thing for me. It was always, the hardest for me. And he would have, like a bottle of liquor in the house, and just seeing that, in the kitchen day after day definitely was hard for me mentally. There were a couple times when I had the thought, I could drink and nobody would know. But thankfully, because of the support system I have and, what I do on a daily basis to stay sober, I did not relapse. But it would have been very easy to.
Yeah, right, because it would have made it less painful to watch your husband.
It would have.
What impact has the baby had on you in terms of sobriety?
The baby has a huge impact on me. I mean, I love her more than I thought I could love her. She keeps me very, very busy. But at the same time, I know myself, and I will say that if I were to have relapsed, she probably wouldn't have, that love for her would not have been able to get me sober again.
Really?
And it's really unfortunate. Yeah. I mean, I love being a mom more than I thought I would. And she's so amazing. But that addiction in myself, I've seen in the past, is so strong that a lot of times, like, there's nothing that's going to stop me. Until something bad happens and I go back to treatment.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's brutally honest of you, and we appreciate that candor on your part. Katie's now, as I said, 5 years sober. She is an absolute shining example of somebody that can work hard at this and make it work. The evidence of that is more striking with the fact that your husband is now currently battling his way back. So, Katie, thanks so much for sharing. The last point here I just wanted to mention is with regard to telemedicine, which is sort of long-distance treatment. You avail yourself of that from time to time. Can that work for people, do you think?
So I definitely think that the telemedicine in terms of therapy is wonderful. It makes it easier, more attainable. You're not getting in your car and driving somewhere or trying to figure out how to take the bus somewhere. I think that people are more likely, at least I'm more likely to, get on to a therapy session on Zoom versus trying to carve out time in my day to physically go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of a 12-step program, I don't think Zoom meetings and telehealth is really beneficial long term.
Yeah, because that loss of being in the room and with other people is practically impossible to recreate electronically. Katie, thanks so much. It's great to hear your strong, clear voice, and congratulations on the baby. Great good luck with your husband. I hope that works out for you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for hanging with us on the corner. That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.